Arthur laughed, the sound hollow in his grand office, echoing the emptiness he often felt. Prove my children are suffering, he had challenged himself countless times, his success a shield against his deepest fears. Maria, the seemingly devoted cleaner, had just smiled then, a serene, almost knowing expression that now haunted his quiet moments. What he would find next upon his unexpected return would shatter his carefully constructed world forever, revealing a truth far more chilling than any boardroom betrayal. The private jet touched down with a familiar whisper, an hour earlier than scheduled. Arthur Vance, a titan of industry whose name graced skyscrapers and philanthropic foundations, felt an unusual tremor of unease despite the exhaustion clinging to him like a second skin. He had cut his business trip short, an inexplicable tugging at his heart urging him homeward, a sensation he hadn't truly felt since the devastating departure of his beloved wife Eleanor during the birth of their youngest. The sprawling mansion, usually a beacon of quiet grandeur, seemed eerily silent as his chauffeur pulled away, leaving him alone with the deepening twilight and an unsettling quietude that seeped into the very bones of the house. He pushed open the heavy oak door, expecting the usual warm, albeit subdued, welcome, but instead a profound hush greeted him, thicker than any silence he had ever known within these walls. He moved through the grand foyer, his footsteps muffled by thick Persian rugs, the air surprisingly still and heavy. No playful squeals from Lily, his vibrant 6-year-old daughter, no gurgles from little Leo, barely a year old, whose tiny cries were usually the soundtrack to his homecoming. A knot tightened in his stomach as he ascended the sweeping staircase, the ornate banister feeling cold beneath his touch. A faint, almost imperceptible whimper reached him from the direction of the children's wing, a sound so fragile it threatened to break his composure. He quickened his pace, his tailored suit suddenly feeling constricting, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The door to Leo's nursery was ajar, a sliver of light escaping into the shadowed hallway. As Arthur drew closer, the whimper intensified into a distressed cry, laced with a plea so raw it pierced him to his core. He pushed the door open gently, his gaze sweeping the room, stopping abruptly at the sight that unfolded before him. Little Leo lay in his crib, flushed and agitated, his tiny fists batting weakly at the air, his face slick with sweat. Beside the crib, Maria, the woman he had entrusted with his most precious treasures, stood with her back to him, her posture rigid, a peculiar stillness about her. She turned, her smile a practiced, almost too perfect mask, but her eyes held a flicker of something he couldn't quite place, a shadow that contradicted her outwardly calm demeanor. Lily, his bright, imaginative Lily, was huddled in a corner, her small frame trembling, her eyes wide and glistening with unshed tears. She looked at him, her father, with a mixture of terror and desperate hope, her voice a barely audible whisper, thick with fear. "Please, cleaner. It's too hot," she had begged, her words hanging in the air like a fragile, unheard prayer. Maria's smile wavered for a fraction of a second, a subtle shift that Arthur, consumed by the sudden surge of protective fury, barely registered. He rushed forward, his entire being focused on his children, the world outside this room suddenly fading into insignificance. He reached for Leo, his hand finding the baby's skin alarmingly warm, and then turned to Lily, whose small hand instinctively reached for his, clutching it with a strength that belied her tender age, her eyes still fixed on Maria with an unshakable dread. Arthur, a man who commanded boardrooms and brokered multi-million-dollar deals with effortless grace, now felt utterly powerless, a cold dread seeping into his very bones. He had always prided himself on his ability to control every aspect of his life, to provide the best for his children, especially after Eleanor's untimely departure had left such an aching void. He had thrown himself into work, burying his grief in endless meetings and international flights, believing that by securing their financial future, he was fulfilling his paternal duty. Maria had arrived like a savior, her gentle demeanor and reassuring smile masking what exactly, he now wondered with a chilling certainty. Her references had been impeccable, her presence a comforting constant in the chaos of his new single-parent reality. He had seen her as a godsend, a dedicated caregiver who allowed him the space to grieve, to work, to simply exist. Now, standing in his son's nursery, watching his daughter's terrified gaze, the image of his dependable cleaner began to warp, twisting into something far more sinister, a masquerade he had been too blind, too heartbroken to see. Arthur's mind raced, a whirlwind of confusion and fear eclipsing his usual corporate composure. He scooped Leo into his arms, the baby's feverish warmth a stark contrast to the cold dread that now gripped him. He murmured soothing words, his voice rough with emotion, his gaze never leaving Maria's face, searching for an explanation, any flicker of understanding beyond her placid smile. Lily, still clutching his hand, buried her face against his leg, her tiny body trembling. A silent testament to a fear that was far too profound for a child her age. Maria, regaining her composure with an almost unsettling swiftness, stepped forward, her hands clasped demurely. "Oh, Mr. Vance, you're back so early, I didn't hear the car." "Leo has a bit of a fever. I was just about to give him some medicine," she explained, her voice a soft, almost melodic hum that usually soothed the household. The May grated against Arthur's frayed nerves. He felt a sudden, inexplicable urge to shield his children from her, an instinct primal and fierce overriding years of detached professionalism. His world, once meticulously ordered and predictable, had been fractured by Eleanor's sudden and heartbreaking departure during Leo's birth. The vibrant colors of his life had dulled, replaced by shades of gray, and he had sought solace in the relentless pursuit of financial success, believing it was the only way to honor Eleanor's memory and secure his children's future. He had become a ghost in his own grand house, present but not truly there, his heart a raw, open wound that refused to heal. Lily, so much like her mother with her bright eyes and curious spirit, had often tried to draw him out, her small hand reaching for his, her innocent questions about her mother's whereabouts piercing his carefully constructed emotional barriers. He had loved them fiercely, of course, but his grief had cast a long shadow, creating a chasm between his paternal duties and his emotional availability. Void Maria had effortlessly and seemingly benevolently filled. Maria, a woman in her late 40s with a deceptively gentle face and kind eyes, had seemed like a godsend in those dark early days. She had arrived with glowing references, a quiet efficiency, and an almost uncanny ability to anticipate the children's needs, or so Arthur had believed. She had become the unwavering constant in their lives, managing the household with an iron fist disguised by a velvet glove, allowing Arthur to immerse himself in work, to travel, to avoid the painful emptiness of his home. He had seen her as an extension of his own protective instincts, capable guardian who allowed him the space to navigate his own profound sorrow. She would often speak of her own past, a carefully curated narrative of hardship and resilience, fostering a sense of trust and empathy in Arthur that now felt sickeningly misplaced. Her motivations, he now dimly realized, might run deeper than mere dedication, a chilling thought that snaked its way into his already troubled mind. Over the past few weeks, subtle shifts had begun to prick at the edges of Arthur's subconscious, small anomalies he had dismissed as the anxieties of an overly protective father. Lily had grown quieter, her once boisterous laughter replaced by a timid smile, her eyes often downcast. She had started refusing her favorite foods, citing vague stomach aches, and had developed a newfound reluctance to be left alone with Maria, clinging to Arthur's leg whenever he was home, a silent plea he had been too preoccupied to fully comprehend. Doors to the children's wing were sometimes locked from the inside, a practice Maria explained as a safety measure to prevent Lily from wandering, but which now felt like a prison. He recalled overhearing hushed conversations, Maria's voice sharp and low, followed by Lily's muffled sobs, dismissed by Maria as typical childhood tantrums. He had wanted to believe her, desperately, needing the stability she represented. But now, witnessing Lily's raw terror and Leo's distress, the pieces of a fragmented, terrifying puzzle began to click into place. The chilling whisper from Lily about the heat, Maria's fleeting moment of discomfort, the pervasive quietness of the house upon his arrival, it all coalesced into a horrifying picture. Arthur's guilt, a heavy cloak he had worn since Eleanor's departure, transformed into a burning resolve. He had been absent, yes, emotionally distant, but he would not be blind. He would not be a negligent father, not after this. He gently placed Leo back into his crib, assuring him with soft words that everything would be all right, his hand lingering on the baby's forehead. Then turned to Lily, pulling her into a fierce, protective embrace. He would find out the truth, no matter the cost, driven by a love for his children that was finally, unequivocally, awakened from its slumber. His gaze met Maria's, and for the first time she saw not the grieving, distracted millionaire, but a father whose eyes now burned with an unyielding, dangerous clarity. Arthur's resolve, once a distant ember, now blazed, illuminating the sinister shadows that had gathered unseen in his home. He held Lily close, her small body trembling against his, a silent plea echoing the whispered words that had pierced his heart. He felt Leo's feverish skin beneath his palm, the urgency of the moment eclipsing all professional detachment. He carried Leo to the master bathroom, running cool water, gently bathing the baby's face and tiny hands, Maria hovering in the doorway, her presence a heavy, unwelcome weight. She offered remedies, her voice saccharine sweet, but Arthur, his senses now acutely tuned, noticed the way her gaze darted towards Lily. A flicker of something almost imperceptible, a warning perhaps, hidden behind her practiced smile. He chose to ignore her suggestions, relying instead on his own instincts. His touch a newfound comfort to his son, who slowly began to calm, his whimpers subsiding into soft sighs. Later, with Leo sleeping peacefully and Lily tucked safely beside him in his own bed, Arthur began his silent vigil. He watched Maria move through the house, her movements precise, her face an unreadable mask of composure. Yet he felt an undercurrent of tension in her presence, a subtle shift in the air whenever she entered a room. He observed her interactions with Lily, noting the way his daughter flinched, almost imperceptibly when Maria's hand reached out to adjust her hair, or how her eyes would drop, avoiding Maria's gaze. He started to replay countless moments in his mind, small incidents he had previously dismissed as childish whims or his own grief-induced paranoia. Lily's sudden aversion to certain toys, Leo's unexplained bruises that Maria had attributed to clumsy tumbles, the faint, persistent scent of an unfamiliar, harsh cleaning agent that seemed to linger around the children's room even after Maria had left. Each memory now felt like a fresh wound, a testament to his own unwitting negligence. He remembered the day Maria had insisted on redecorating the children's playroom, painting over the bright, whimsical murals Eleanor had painstakingly created, claiming the colors were too stimulating, causing the children to be overactive. Arthur, lost in his sorrow, had simply agreed, seeing it as a practical decision. Now he wondered if it had been an act of erasure, a deliberate attempt to remove Eleanor's loving touch from their lives, to assert her own dominion. He recalled the peculiar way Maria would often intercept calls from his sister, Clara, who lived a few towns away and occasionally offered to visit, always with an excuse about the children being unwell or asleep, effectively isolating them. He had trusted Maria implicitly, a trust now crumbling into bitter ash, replaced by a cold, burning suspicion that fueled his resolve. The next morning, Arthur approached Maria, his voice calm, almost unnervingly so, masking the tempest raging within him. He explained that he would be working from home for the foreseeable future, citing an urgent project that demanded his constant presence. Maria's smile tightened, a fraction of a second too slow to appear, her eyes betraying a momentary flash of irritation before she regained her composure. "Of course, Mr. Vance," she replied, her voice still smooth, but with a subtle edge that Arthur hadn't noticed before. He watched her carefully, noting her every move as she prepared breakfast. Her hands expertly slicing fruit, yet her gaze lingered on Lily a moment too long, a possessive glint in her eyes that sent a shiver down Arthur's spine. He saw Lily recoil slightly when Maria offered her a glass of juice, a silent, almost imperceptible protest that spoke volumes. That evening, after the children were asleep, Arthur began his meticulous search. He remembered Eleanor's fastidious nature, her habit of documenting everything, from household budgets to cherished memories. He knew she kept a hidden compartment in her old writing desk, a place she called her secret garden of thoughts. It was a small, ornate desk tucked away in her former study, a room Arthur had largely avoided since her departure, unable to bear the weight of her absence. He moved through the silent house, his heart thudding with a mixture of apprehension and grim determination. He found the desk, its surface still bearing the faint scent of Eleanor's favorite lavender, a poignant reminder of the love he had lost, and the love he now fought to reclaim. He ran his fingers along the intricate carvings, searching for the hidden latch, a desperate hope blooming in his chest that Eleanor, even in her absence, might offer a path to the truth. Arthur's fingers traced the delicate rosewood, a ghost of Eleanor's touch seeming to guide him. He pressed gently on a tiny, almost imperceptible knot in the wood, and with a soft click, a narrow drawer sprang open from the side of the desk, revealing its hidden sanctuary. Inside, nestled amongst dried lavender sprigs, lay a small, leather-bound journal and a sealed envelope, both addressed to him in Eleanor's elegant script. His breath hitched, a wave of profound emotion washing over him, a blend of sorrow for her absence and a burgeoning hope that she, even from beyond, was reaching out to him. He carefully lifted the journal, its pages filled with Eleanor's familiar handwriting, chronicle of her thoughts and observations, particularly after Maria's arrival. He sat in the quiet solitude of the study, the journal open in his hands, its entries painting a picture of Eleanor's growing unease. She had initially praised Maria's efficiency, her gentle demeanor, but as the weeks turned into months, a subtle shift in her tone became apparent. Eleanor had written of Maria's increasing possessiveness over the children, her strange suggestions regarding household finances, and a peculiar incident where a small, valuable antique locket, a family heirloom, had gone missing, only to reappear days later in an unexpected place, with Maria offering a convoluted explanation. More chillingly, Eleanor had detailed Maria's increasingly forceful opinions on how the children should be raised, subtly undermining Eleanor's own decisions and fostering a sense of dependency that had troubled his wife deeply. She had confided her worries about Maria's manipulative streak, her ability to twist words and situations, and her growing suspicion that Maria was not as benevolent as she appeared, even hinting at a calculated effort to isolate Eleanor from her friends and family, particularly Clara, Arthur's sister. The journal entries became more urgent, detailing how Maria had subtly discouraged visits from friends claiming the children were too sensitive, or that Eleanor needed her rest, effectively creating a barrier around the family. There was a specific entry about Maria intercepting a call from Clara, giving a false impression of Eleanor's availability, a detail that resonated with Arthur's own recent observations. Eleanor had even noted small unexplained discrepancies in household expenses, amounts that were insignificant on their own but collectively painted a picture of quiet, consistent pilfering. A cold dread seeped into Arthur's heart as he read, realizing with horrifying clarity that Eleanor had seen the warning signs, had tried to communicate them, but her departure had left the family vulnerable, and him, too consumed by grief, utterly blind. The last entry, penned just days before Leo's birth and Eleanor's subsequent departure, was a desperate plea. "Arthur, my love, please watch Maria. Something is not right. Protect our children." The weight of Eleanor's words settled upon him, a heavy mantle of responsibility and regret. He had failed her, and in doing so, had unwittingly placed his children in harm's way. But now, armed with Eleanor's foresight, his resolve hardened into unbreakable steel. He understood that Maria's motives were not merely about money, but about control, about usurping a position, perhaps even exacting some twisted form of vengeance or satisfying a deep-seated desire for power. He knew he could not confront her directly without concrete proof. Her manipulative nature, so clearly described by Eleanor, would allow her to twist the narrative, to paint him as unstable. He needed evidence, irrefutable and undeniable. The next few days became a careful dance of deception and observation. Arthur maintained his facade of working from home, spending hours in his study, but his real work was far more urgent. He discreetly installed tiny high-definition cameras in the children's rooms, in the playroom, and in common areas, ensuring they were almost invisible, their lenses capturing every nuance of Maria's interactions. He activated an old audio recording device Eleanor had once used for dictation, placing it strategically to pick up hushed conversations. He began to track the household expenses himself, cross-referencing them with bank statements, confirming Eleanor's suspicions of small, consistent diversions of funds. He also noticed Maria's subtle attempts to undermine his authority in front of the children, making comments about his preoccupation with work, or how she was the one truly looking after them, a poisonous seed she attempted to plant in their young minds. He spent every available moment with Lily and Leo, showering them with affection, reading to Lily, playing games, holding Leo close, allowing his presence to become a comforting constant once more. Lily, though still wary, slowly began to thaw, her small hand finding his more readily, her eyes losing some of their haunted quality. He would gently ask her about her day when Maria was not present, listening intently to her innocent descriptions, sifting through them for any veiled references to Maria's behavior. Sometimes a quiet sob from Lily would lead him to find her huddled in her room, claiming she had a bad dream, but her eyes would dart towards the closed door, a silent accusation against the woman who now cast a long, dark shadow over their home. He saw the subtle bruises on Leo's arm, dismissed by Maria as accidental bumps. But now, under his watchful eye, they seemed to appear more frequently, more deliberately. Arthur's heart ached with every new piece of evidence, every confirmation of his worst fears, yet it also fueled his determination, knowing that justice, for Eleanor and for his precious children, was within his grasp. The hidden cameras, mere pinpricks of glass and metal, became Arthur's eyes and ears, revealing a chilling tableau of deception and subtle cruelty. The first week of his silent watch peeled back layers of Maria's carefully constructed facade, exposing the venomous core beneath her placid smile. He watched, heartbroken and enraged, as Maria, believing herself unobserved, would snap at Lily for small infractions, her voice a low, menacing hiss that made his daughter flinch and retreat into herself. He saw her deliberately ignore Leo's cries, letting the baby fuss and wail for minutes on end, sometimes even turning up the television to drown out the sounds, a stark contrast to the loving, attentive caregiver she presented to Arthur. One evening, the camera in the playroom captured Maria forcefully snatching a beloved teddy bear from Lily, telling her she was too old for such childish things, reducing the small girl to silent, trembling tears. The footage was a brutal confirmation of Eleanor's fears, a testament to his own agonizing blindness, and each frame solidified his resolve to tear down Maria's reign of terror. The financial discrepancies Eleanor had noted in her journal now began to make sickening sense. Arthur, with his keen business acumen, delved deeper into the household accounts, cross-referencing every receipt, every expenditure. He discovered a pattern of inflated invoices from obscure cleaning supply companies, all paid to a shell corporation registered under a name strikingly similar to Maria's maiden name. A clever scheme to siphon off funds without raising immediate suspicion. He found evidence of unauthorized transfers from a seldom-used household maintenance account to an offshore account. Small sums initially, but growing in frequency and size over the past year. It wasn't just petty theft. It was a calculated, long-term embezzlement, a systematic draining of his resources, fueled not just by greed, but by a deeper, more insidious desire for control and perhaps a twisted sense of entitlement. Maria had not only stolen his money, but had also stolen the peace and innocence of his children, twisting his grief into an opportunity for her own dark machinations. Maria, sensing a shift in the household dynamics, became subtly more aggressive, her manipulations more overt, especially when Arthur was in his study, ostensibly working. She would loudly complain about Lily's behavior, making sure Arthur could overhear, subtly painting his daughter as difficult and disobedient, attempting to drive a wedge between father and child. She tried to reinforce her authority, telling Lily that only she knew what was best for her, or that her father was too busy to understand her needs. Lily, however, fortified by Arthur's renewed presence and unwavering affection, began to resist, her small acts of defiance growing bolder. She would seek out her father, clinging to him, her eyes silently pleading for protection, a plea Arthur now understood and honored with every fiber of his being. He would gently redirect Maria, asserting his parental authority, a move that would cause Maria's smile to falter, her eyes flashing with a barely concealed resentment. One particularly harrowing night, the audio recorder in Leo's nursery captured a chilling exchange. Leo was crying, his fever having returned with a vengeance, and Maria's voice, usually so soft, was laced with an icy impatience. "Be quiet, you little brat. Your father's too busy for you," she had hissed, her words cutting through the baby's whimpers. Then a distinct thud, followed by a sharp, pained cry from Leo. Arthur, listening to the recording in his study, felt a primal scream tear through his soul, but no sound escaped his lips. His hands trembled, clenching into fists, a cold, unyielding fury taking root deep within him. He reviewed the corresponding video footage, seeing Maria roughly adjust Leo in his crib, her movements far from gentle, before she stalked out of the room, leaving the infant to cry alone in the suffocating warmth she had deliberately allowed to persist. The memory of Lily's whispered plea, "Please, cleaner. It's too hot," echoed in his mind, now chillingly substantiated by Maria's deliberate cruelty. He knew he could no longer delay. The evidence was overwhelming, irrefutable. Arthur reached out to Clara, his sister, the one person Eleanor had trusted implicitly, the one Maria had worked so hard to keep away. Clara, a kind and astute woman who adored her niece and nephew, was initially shocked, then filled with a righteous anger that mirrored Arthur's own. She listened patiently as Arthur recounted everything, showing her the damning footage, playing the horrifying audio, her face paling with each revelation. Clara, a lawyer by profession, immediately understood the gravity of the situation and the meticulous approach required. "We will make sure she pays for every tear, Arthur," Clara stated, her voice firm, her resolve a welcome anchor in Arthur's storm-tossed emotions. Her support was a lifeline, a tangible connection to the world of justice and accountability, empowering him to move forward with the formal confrontation he knew was inevitable. The days leading up to the confrontation were a delicate dance of nerves and steely determination. Arthur ensured his children were never out of his sight, their safety now his paramount concern. He saw Maria's growing unease, her glances becoming more suspicious, her pretense of subservience wearing thin around the edges. She seemed to sense the walls closing in, her carefully constructed world of manipulation beginning to crack. Arthur, however, remained outwardly calm, masking the tempest brewing within him, preparing for the moment when he would finally expose the truth. Not just for his children, but for Eleanor, whose silent plea had finally been heard. Clara's unwavering conviction became Arthur's bedrock, a steady force against the turbulent emotions that threatened to overwhelm him. Together they meticulously reviewed the mountain of evidence, the chilling video footage of Maria's subtle cruelties, the audio recordings capturing her sharp words and Leo's pained cries, Eleanor's journal entries detailing Maria's insidious manipulations, and the irrefutable financial records exposing her systematic theft. Each piece solidified their resolve, transforming Arthur's grief-fueled guilt into a potent, unyielding determination. They spent hours charting a course of action, Clara, with her legal expertise, guiding Arthur through the intricate steps necessary to ensure Maria faced the full weight of her transgressions, not just for the pilfered funds, but for the far greater crime against the tender hearts of his children. The decision to act was not made lightly, knowing the upheaval it would bring. But the image of Lily's terrified eyes and Leo's feverish whimpers burned brightly in Arthur's mind, extinguishing any lingering hesitation. As Arthur and Clara orchestrated their strategy, Maria's carefully constructed composure began to fray at the edges, like an old tapestry unraveling thread by thread. She sensed the shift in the atmosphere, the unspoken tension that now permeated the grand house, a stark contrast to the distant, grief-laden silence she had grown accustomed to. Her smiles became brittle, her movements more guarded, her gaze darting suspiciously between Arthur and the children, searching for the source of this unsettling change. She attempted to reassert her dominance, her voice taking on a sharper edge when addressing Lily, her instructions becoming more demanding, her presence a heavy cloud that still caused Lily to shrink into herself. Yet Arthur's constant presence, his gentle reassurances, and the sheer force of his protective love began to fortify Lily, giving her a quiet strength to resist Maria's subtle psychological attacks. Her small acts of defiance a testament to her burgeoning courage. Arthur maintained his vigilant watch, his heart aching with every fresh observation of Maria's manipulative behavior, yet also swelling with pride at Lily's growing resilience. He spent every spare moment with his children, their laughter, though still fragile, slowly beginning to echo through the once somber halls. He read to Lily for hours, tracing the words with his finger, his voice a soothing balm, and he held Leo close, feeling the steady beat of his son's heart against his own, a tangible connection to the life he was fighting to reclaim. As the weight of his past absence pressed heavily upon him, a constant reminder of the precious moments he had lost, but it also fueled his unwavering commitment to be a father truly present, truly engaged, truly protective. He saw the world through his children's eyes now, recognizing the subtle cues of discomfort, the unspoken fears that had once been invisible to his grief-clouded vision, and he vowed never again to let his own sorrow overshadow their needs. The day of reckoning arrived with a quiet intensity, ushered in not by a dramatic storm, but by the calm, measured steps of justice. Clara, impeccably dressed and radiating a quiet authority, arrived at the mansion accompanied by two plainclothes officers, their presence a stark, undeniable declaration of intent. Arthur stood beside his sister, his hand resting protectively on Lily's shoulder, who, despite her apprehension, looked up at him with a newfound trust. The officers, briefed extensively by Clara, moved with professional efficiency, their calm demeanor a stark contrast to the sudden, sharp intake of breath from Maria as she emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron, her practiced smile dissolving into a mask of pure shock and disbelief at the sight of the unexpected visitors. Maria's initial reaction was a desperate scramble for control, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and cunning. She attempted to play the victim, her voice trembling as she asked, "What is the meaning of this, Mr. Vance?" Her gaze flicking towards the children, a silent, desperate plea for their sympathy, final manipulative attempt to turn them against their father. Each had to deflect, to charm, to twist the narrative. Her words a torrent of denial and feigned innocence, painting Arthur as a grieving, unstable man prone to delusion. She even tried to invoke her carefully curated past of hardship, hoping to elicit pity, but Clara, with a calm, unyielding voice, presented the officers with the meticulously compiled evidence, the financial records, the video footage, the audio recordings, each item a silent, damning witness to Maria's betrayal. The weight of undeniable truth began to press down on Maria, her composure shattering under the relentless exposure of her lies. The officers, after reviewing the initial evidence, informed Maria that she was being taken in for questioning regarding the embezzlement of funds and, more gravely, for suspected child abuse. Her face, usually so composed, contorted into a mask of pure rage, her eyes flashing with a venomous hatred as she finally dropped her pretense. She lashed out, her voice rising to a shrill crescendo, her words a desperate, bitter tirade against Arthur, against Eleanor, against the perceived injustices of her own life, attempting to tear down everyone around her as her world crumbled. But Arthur, shielding his children from her outburst, stood firm, his gaze unwavering, his heart filled not with vengeance, but with a profound sense of relief, knowing that the long, dark shadow Maria had cast over their lives was finally irrevocably lifting. The children, though frightened by the raw display of anger, clung to Arthur, their small hands finding comfort and safety in his embrace, marking the true beginning of their journey towards healing. The sudden, jarring silence that descended upon the house after Maria's departure was profound. A vacuum where oppressive tension had once resided, now filled with a fragile, almost sacred quiet. Arthur gathered his children into his arms, Lily clinging to him with a ferocity that spoke volumes of her unburdened fear, while Leo, nestled against his chest, finally slept a truly peaceful sleep, his small body relaxing against his father's warmth. The air, which had felt thick and suffocating for so long, now seemed to breathe, carrying with it the faint scent of fresh air and the promise of a new beginning. Arthur held them close, a silent vow passing through his heart, a commitment to mend every broken piece, to fill every empty space with an abundance of unconditional love that would wash away the shadows Maria had cast. Clara, ever the pillar of strength and clear-headed action, took charge of the immediate aftermath, ensuring that the legal process moved forward with an unwavering resolve. She worked tirelessly with the authorities, presenting the irrefutable evidence that Arthur had so meticulously gathered. Each video clip, each audio recording, each financial document speaking volumes of Maria's calculated cruelty and greed. The sheer weight of the truth was undeniable, and the wheels of justice, though sometimes slow, began to turn with a steady, relentless momentum. Arthur found solace in Clara's competence, knowing that Maria would be held accountable for her actions, not just for the pilfered funds, but for the profound emotional and psychological harm she had inflicted upon his innocent children. He knew the path ahead for Maria would be a difficult one, facing the consequences of her choices, a stark contrast to the healing journey now beginning for his own family. Arthur's world, once defined by the relentless pursuit of corporate success, now revolved entirely around Lily and Leo. He shelved his demanding work schedule, delegating responsibilities, understanding that his true wealth lay not in his business empire, but in the vibrant, beating hearts of his children. He spent his days in their presence, rediscovering the simple joys of fatherhood he had unknowingly neglected. He read to Lily from colorful storybooks, his voice a comforting rhythm in the quiet nursery, and he spent countless hours cradling Leo, singing soft lullabies, watching as the baby's once haunted eyes slowly filled with a light of trust and contentment. He meticulously supervised their meals, ensuring they ate well, and he personally oversaw their bedtime routines, transforming those once dreaded hours into cherished moments of connection and security. The house itself began to transform, shedding its layers of unspoken fear and replacing them with warmth and light. Arthur removed anything that reminded him or the children of Maria, replacing old furniture with brighter, more inviting pieces, creating spaces filled with soft blankets, colorful toys, and the cheerful sounds of children's laughter. He hired a new, compassionate housekeeper, a kind woman named Elena, whose gentle nature and genuine affection for the children quickly became a comforting presence. Elena understood the delicate nature of their healing, moving through the house with a quiet grace, her presence a soft hum of domesticity rather than an oppressive force. The once stifling heat in Leo's room was replaced by a comfortably cool breeze, a small but significant detail that spoke volumes of the shift from deliberate neglect to attentive care. Lily's healing was a gradual, tender process, marked by small yet profound victories. The nightmares, though still present, became less frequent, less terrifying, as Arthur would rush to her side, holding her close until the fear subsided, whispering reassurances of safety and love. She slowly began to shed her shell of wariness, her laughter echoing more freely through the halls, her small hand reaching for Arthur's with increasing confidence. She started drawing again, her pictures evolving from dark, scribbled shapes to vibrant scenes of a happy family. Her father, herself, and Leo always bathed in sunlight. Arthur saw the resilience in her spirit, the innate capacity for joy that Maria had tried so desperately to extinguish, and his heart swelled with a fierce, protective love that knew no bounds. Leo, too, blossomed under Arthur's unwavering care. The bruises on his arm faded, replaced by the soft, unblemished skin of a healthy baby. His cries became less frequent, replaced by happy gurgles and joyful squeals. His small hands reaching out to grasp Arthur's finger, his eyes, once shadowed with fear, now sparkling with recognition and affection. Arthur found immense joy in these small moments, in the simple act of feeding Leo, of changing his diaper, of watching him take his first wobbly steps across the living room carpet. Every milestone, every smile, every sign of his children's growing well-being was a testament to the power of presence, of consistent love, and of the unwavering truth that had brought them to this newfound peace. The house, once a silent monument to grief and hidden cruelty, was now a vibrant, living testament to hope and the enduring strength of a family rebuilt through courage and unconditional devotion. 2 years unfurled like a gentle bloom, painting the once somber mansion with hues of laughter and vibrant life. The silence, once heavy with unspoken grief and hidden terrors, had long since been replaced by the joyous symphony of children at play, the comforting hum of domesticity, and the deep, resonant rhythm of a father's unwavering love. Arthur, no longer defined by his corporate empire but by the boundless affection in his heart, walked through his days with a lightness he had never known, his past absence a distant echo against the vivid present he now cherished. He often found Lily, now a bright-eyed 8-year-old, tending to a small rose garden they had planted together, her tiny hands carefully nurturing the delicate petals, a mirror of the care she now received. Her drawings, once stark and shadowed, burst with color, depicting scenes of family picnics, playful moments with Leo, and the comforting image of her father, always present, always smiling. Leo, a boisterous and curious 2-year-old, filled the house with his delighted squeals, chasing after Lily, his steps now firm and confident, his laughter a pure, unadulterated joy that resonated through every room. Arthur reveled in every milestone, every scraped knee kissed better, every bedtime story whispered with infinite patience. He cooked meals with them, messy and full of shared giggles, teaching Lily how to stir, quote, letting Leo taste small, sweet fruits, creating traditions that wove the fabric of their new, resilient family tighter with each passing day. The shadows Maria had cast faded into oblivion, replaced by the radiant light of a home rebuilt on the foundations of truth, courage, and a love that had proven itself stronger than any darkness. Justice, swift and undeniable, had indeed found Maria, her cruelty exposed, her manipulations undone, leaving her to face the consequences of her choices while Arthur's family was finally free to heal and thrive. The path had been arduous, marked by pain and revelation, but Arthur had emerged not just as a father, but as a man profoundly transformed, his heart brimming with a gratitude that knew no end. He understood now, with crystal clarity, that true wealth lay not in fortunes amassed, but in the innocent embrace of his children, in their trusting eyes, and in the quiet strength of their unbreakable bond. The memory of Eleanor, once a source of crushing grief, now brought a gentle warmth, a knowing smile, as if she approved of the vibrant, loving life he had created for their children. He had honored her legacy, not with sorrow, but with the boundless, unconditional love he now poured into Lily and Leo, ensuring their future was bright, secure, and filled with the kind of joy Maria had tried so desperately to extinguish. What depths of courage would you find within yourself to protect the innocent? What truths, however painful, would you unearth to secure the future of those you hold most dear? Remember, in the quiet corners of our world, evil will ultimately be punished, goodness will be rewarded, and justice is always built upon the unwavering pillars of truth, courage, and unconditional love.